June 23, 1942, RAF Pembry airfield in South Wales, British spotters watching through binoculars saw something that seemed impossible happening in sky above them, a sleek German fighter descending through clouds lining up for landing on British territory, with everything about this moment suggesting emergency protocols should activate across entire airfield, but nothing happened. Focke-Wulf FW190 touched down smoothly on grass runway, rolling to stop near control tower, and canopy slid back, revealing German pilot Armen Faber climbing out, looking around at unfamiliar buildings. Then his blood ran cold. Aircraft on flight line weren't Messerschmitts, they were Spitfires. Uniforms rushing toward him weren't Luftwaffe grey, they were Royal Air Force blue. In that single moment British military understood they possessed something they'd been desperately seeking for 8 months. Germany's most lethal fighter, completely intact and undamaged. For 8 months before this moment, Focke-Wulf FW190 had been nightmare-haunting Allied pilots across English Channel, destroying British and American fighters with devastating superiority that seemed impossible to counter, overcome, or understand through any tactical innovation or new training doctrine. First appearance in combat over France occurred in September 1941, and from very first engagement Allied pilots knew they were facing something extraordinarily dangerous and threatening everything they believed about aerial combat. British RAF squadron leader J.E. Johnson, who would eventually become Britain's top-scoring ace with 38 confirmed kills, encountered FW190 in early 1942 and barely survived encounter, reporting afterward in shaken terms that German fighter was faster than Spitfire Mark 5s in level flight, could outdive anything British possessed, and had firepower that was absolutely devastating in ways pilots had never experienced. RAF fighter losses climbed dramatically throughout first half of 1942, with experienced pilots who survived Battle of Britain being systematically shot down by aircraft they couldn't match in any combat scenario imaginable. In February 1942, German naval ships Scharnhorst and Gneisenau sailed virtually unscathed through English Channel under heavy Luftwaffe FW190 fighter cover, while British Spitfires were powerless to interfere. Over 2 days in early June, FW190s of Jägerschwader 26 shot down 15 RAF Spitfire versus without losses. At Dieppe operation in August 1942, 48 squadrons of Spitfires engaged FW190 as, resulting in 90 RAF fighters lost compared to only 23 German losses. Intelligence officers desperately needed answers about what made FW190 so effective, superior, and dangerous, but every captured example found on battlefields was too damaged to reveal secrets or provide meaningful analysis. When Faber stepped out of captured aircraft at RAF Pembry that June afternoon, British intelligence officers experienced something approaching euphoria, realizing they now possessed pristine example of Germany's most lethal fighter, completely intact, undamaged, and available for detailed examination. Air Chief Marshal Sholto Douglas, commanding RAF Fighter Command, immediately ordered aircraft transported to Royal Aircraft Establishment at Farnborough, where Britain's top aviation engineers would document, measure, analyze, and dissect every aspect of machine. What they discovered explained everything Allied pilots had been experiencing in combat but couldn't articulate before. Focke-Wulf represented masterpiece of practical engineering, embodying brutal functionality contrasting sharply with elegant aerodynamic design approach. Spitfire represented BMW 801 radial engine produced 1700 horsepower compared to Spitfire Merlin engines 1470 horsepower. At 2,000 feet altitude, FW190 was 25 to 30 miles per hour faster. At 3,000 feet it was 30 to 35 miles per hour faster. At 15,000 feet its lowest speed advantage remained 20 miles per hour over Spitfire. At all altitudes FW190 remained faster fighter. Most devastating advantage FW190 possessed was extraordinary roll rate, allowing aircraft to snap from one bank to other faster than any Allied fighter could possibly match, creating revolutionary combat advantage that directly translated to pilot survival and victory. British test pilot Captain Eric Brown immediately understood after flying captured aircraft extensively that German pilot could reverse direction, gain angles, and line up firing solution before Allied pilot could react to maneuver sequence, creating systematic superiority. Firepower was equally stunning, with FW190A3 carrying twin 20mm MG151 cannons and two 7.92mm machine guns mounted in wings close to fuselage, creating tight concentration pattern, devastating at combat ranges where 2-second burst delivered more explosive power than Spitfire could generate, firing continuously for 10 seconds without interruption. Dive performance explained how FW190 consistently escaped pursuing Spitfires, with German fighters' heavier weight and cleaner aerodynamics allowing it to outdive anything RAF possessed, forcing pilots into tactical disadvantage. In climb, FW190 was slightly better due to superior acceleration, though not remarkably so. The aircraft could enter dive in opposite direction using superior roll rate, then escape using dive speed advantage, enabling German pilot to clear Spitfire completely. But testing also revealed weaknesses that became strategic gold for Allied forces, transforming captured aircraft into invaluable intelligence asset. Focke-Wulf's radial engine, while powerful, created severe cooling problems at high altitudes. Above 20,000 feet, aircraft performance fell off dramatically. Engine struggled in thin air. Pilots reported loss of power, overheating issues, inability to maintain altitude. Engine temperatures climbed dangerously. Supercharger efficiency decreased substantially. Spitfire's Merlin engine, designed specifically for high-altitude operation, actually performed better as altitude increased, giving British pilots alternative strategy for engagement and survival. Heavy weight making FW190 superior. Dive bomber also made it less maneuverable in sustained turning combat, meaning aircraft could outroll Spitfire but couldn't outturn it during prolonged engagement. If Allied pilot could force FW190 into sustained horizontal turn, fight advantage shifted decisively. Spitfire's superior turning circle meant it could get inside FW190 for all-important killing shot. Most critically, American engineers discovered FW190's flight controls became extremely heavy at speeds exceeding 400 miles per hour, requiring significant pilot strength to execute pullout from steep dive, creating vulnerable moment where Allied fighter pursuing through initial descent could catch German pilot fighting his own aircraft controls, struggling against aerodynamic forces. British intelligence immediately distributed tactical bulletins to RAF squadrons warning pilots about FW190's capabilities and weaknesses and how to exploit them. Pamphlets were distributed showing specific maneuvers pilots should avoid and alternative tactics worth attempting. Training sessions emphasized high-altitude combat and energy management, but they made decision proving crucial for entire air war outcome, inviting American test pilots to Farnborough to examine Germany's secret weapon. Firsthand, Major Kasshove, one of first American pilots to fly captured FW190, filed detailed report distributed to every fighter group preparing deployment to Europe with assessment that was blunt, tactical, and revolutionary. His analysis stated FW190 would beat any Allied fighter below 20,000 feet if German pilot knew what he was doing, but American advantage existed at altitude above 25,000 feet where P47 Thunderbolts and later model Spitfires held decisive edge. Force them high and we win, let them dictate low-altitude combat and we die. This single intelligence piece fundamentally changed American fighter tactics in European theater, forcing entire operational philosophy shift. When P47 Thunderbolt units began operations in 1943, doctrine emphasized high-altitude combat. Bomber escorts flew at maximum altitude. Fighter sweeps operated above 25,000 feet whenever possible. When German fighters attempted to engage, American pilots would climb, forcing FW190 to follow into thin air where engines struggled severely. Captured FW190 influenced American aircraft development, with engineers at Wright Field studying roll rate advantage, beginning modification of P47 and P51 ailerons, improving responsiveness across flight envelope, enabling American fighters to match German performance characteristic. Gun placement informed American thinking about weapons concentration positioning. Cockpit layout influenced American fighter design going forward. Control system design was analyzed for improvements, but perhaps most important lesson came from understanding FW190 wasn't invincible. It was excellent aircraft with specific advantages and exploitable weaknesses. Allied pilots, psychologically intimidated by reputation, now possessed concrete information about how to fight and defeat German aircraft decisively. By late 1943, tactical situations shifted dramatically, with American P-47s and P-51s engaging FW-190 at high altitude where Allied fighters held advantage. RAF Spitfire Mark 9 with upgraded Merlin engines could match FW-190 performance across most altitude ranges. Pilots on both sides understood they were flying different aircraft optimized for different conditions. Kill ratios began shifting decisively in Allied favor. FW-190 losses climbed as American and British pilots systematically exploited intelligence gained from Faber's captured aircraft. German pilots noticed that Allied fighters no longer making tactical mistakes, giving FW-190 early dominance. Oberleutnant Joseph Pips Priller, high-scoring FW-190 ace, commented in late 1943 that American pilots had clearly studied aircraft. They know not to follow us into rolling scissors. They force us high where our engines labor, they've learned. Captured FW-190 remained at Farnborough throughout war, serving as reference aircraft for evaluating new German variants. When FW-190D9 Dora with inline engine appeared in late 1944, Allied intelligence immediately compared it to Faber's captured aircraft, understanding how German designers had addressed original's high-altitude limitations. After war aviation historians calculated impact of Faber's disorientation, intelligence gained from examining intact FW-190 was shared with thousands of Allied pilots through tactical bulletins, training films, direct demonstration flights. Knowledge influenced aircraft development, tactical doctrine, operational planning across multiple air forces. Captain Eric Brown, who flew more captured enemy aircraft than any Allied pilot, would later write that Faber's navigation error gave them Rosetta Stone for understanding German fighter design. Every tactical advantage FW-190 possessed was documented and every weakness was exploited. That single aircraft probably saved more Allied lives than any intelligence coup of war. One Luftwaffe officer commented bitterly that they spent months trying to capture intact Spitfire Mark 9 to study improvements, while British didn't have to try because Germany delivered best fighter directly to them. Armen Faber spent remainder of war in prisoner of war camp in Canada. He survived war and returned to Germany, where he lived until 1976. Later assessments acknowledged that combat disorientation could happen to any pilot. Real question was why German intelligence had assumed British would never get hands on intact FW-190. Soviet military received detailed technical specifications through intelligence channels analyzing Faber's captured aircraft. Soviet designers incorporated understanding of FW-190 design principles into Lavochkin La-5 fighter development, accelerating Soviet aircraft modernization program substantially. Soviet pilots received tactical briefings emphasizing high-altitude combat similar to American doctrine, enabling Soviet air forces maintaining competitive edge against Luftwaffe in Eastern Front. Operations, intelligence sharing between American and British military proved instrumental, coordinating fighter tactics across multiple theater operations, ensuring consistent tactical approach against German aircraft. Soviet reconnaissance units identified FW-190 weaknesses through intelligence reports, enabling better mission planning for Soviet bomber escort operations. German High Command launched intensive investigation into Faber's capture, attempting understanding how pilot could become so thoroughly disoriented during routine combat operation. Court-martial proceedings examined whether pilot error constituted dereliction of duty. Ultimately, German military concluded that combat disorientation represented occupational hazard affecting experienced and inexperienced pilots alike under extreme stress conditions. However, German intelligence failure recognizing tactical intelligence value of captured aircraft represented catastrophic strategic miscalculation. German strategists assumed British military possessed limited technical analysis capability, believing German engineering superiority remained insurmountable. This assumption proved fatally wrong. Fighter pilot losses for Luftwaffe accelerated dramatically after 1943 as American and British pilots applying Faber's intelligence achieved consistently higher kill ratios. German replacement pilot training programs struggled maintaining adequate experienced pilot cadre as attrition rates exceeded training production. Experienced German pilots reported frustration encountering American pilots demonstrating sophisticated understanding of FW-190 tactical limitations. American bomber formations. Flying at high altitude with fighter escort achieved increasing success through 1944 and 1945 as German fighter capabilities became progressively neutralized through American tactical adaptation. Strategic bombing campaign against German industrial capacity accelerated directly as result of air superiority achieved through intelligence from Faber's captured aircraft. American bombing accuracy improved substantially with reliable fighter escort maintaining combat air patrol at high altitudes where bombers operated. Industrial production targets received sustained damage from bombing campaigns that previous air superiority conditions could not have achieved. German war production declined measurably as American bombers achieved increasing success destroying aircraft manufacturing facilities, petroleum refineries, ball bearing production facilities. Post-war analysis indicated that single aircraft captured through Faber's navigation error probably saved tens of thousands of Allied lives through improved pilot survival rates achieved by tactical doctrine changes. American pilot losses declined measurably after 1943 compared to earlier combat operations. British pilot survival improved substantially as RAF implemented high-altitude engagement tactics derived from Faber's captured aircraft analysis. Soviet pilot survival metrics improved as Soviet fighter forces received intelligence briefings and modified tactical doctrine accordingly. One German pilot losing orientation during intense combat over English Channel accidentally delivered Germany's secret weapon directly to British intelligence, making it impossible for Luftwaffe to maintain technological advantage over Allied forces. That moment changed aerial warfare over Europe, transformed Allied tactical doctrine and demonstrated that sometimes greatest military victories come not from devastating attacks but from simple human mistakes, giving enemies exactly what they desperately needed to understand how to win wars and achieve victory against seemingly superior technology.